Hi everyone, I'm Mike and welcome to the Sunday Art Show. Every Sunday I post a video. This is either a painting tutorial, a real-time demo or a plein air adventure. I enjoy painting a range of subjects including animals, landscapes, people including portraits and the occasional still life. I also enjoy using quite a wide range of media including conventional acrylic, interactive acrylic, watercolour, ink tints and even marker pens, and sometimes I just combine all of these together. This week I'm going to take you through a real-time demo of my portrait painting of the Irish actress Nicola Coughlan, who starred in Bridgerton and in Derry Girls for week 1 of season 3 of Sky Art's Portrait Artist of the Week. So today I'm using some Rowney mixed media paper. This is A2, which is around about 23 inches by 16.5 inches. And I've just put down a base layer of conventional acrylic. So I mixed up this orange using some cadmium yellow by Winsor & Newton and then some System 3 cadmium red in roughly equal proportions. And then approximately 10 times the amount of white compared to the other colours. And that gave me this nice pale mid-tone which has sealed the paper for me, and now I'm ready to paint. But before I get to that, I'll put you on time lapse, and I'm going to just draw in the face using some watercolor markers. So I'm going to start out with some orange and yellow. Not sure how they'll show up on this pale background, but we'll see how it goes. So you can see that I started out with fairly broad line work with the orange marker. I was using the brush tip there on the watercolor marker, but when I went for my correction lines, so I typically do 2 drawings, one on top of the other. So that in this case, the orange was the first stab, and then the blue lines are the correction. So for example, you can see I've corrected the shape and position of this eye quite considerably, and the same with the mouth here. And in this case, I used the fine line nib of the marker pen. And the reason is sometimes when I'm painting, this watercolor marker will run a little bit, and I found that the dark blue, this is a peacock blue, so it's a mid blue, but it can run into the paint and it can kind of distort the color a little bit. Anyway, as I said, I used conventional acrylic for the background. I'm going to put some interactive acrylic, just a mixture of ultramarine blue and a little bit of alizarin crimson and some titanium white, just to give me a pale purple to block in the background. I'll time lapse that, and then the rest of the video will be real time. Well, I changed my mind a little bit, and I actually used cerulean blue, alizarin crimson and tinting white, and the tinting white gives a slight iridescence and is a little more translucent than titanium white. And while I've got that on my palette, I'm going to continue to use this 1 inch wide or flat synthetic brush. And I'm just mixing in all of the tinting white I've got left on my palette into the colour I still had on my brush at the time. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use that to block in a base layer for the dress. Okay, so in my composition we're not going to see very much of the dress at all, but I can just use this colour to, really quite quickly just lighten that area. Now it's not as light as the highlights will be later on, but nevertheless, it's just better than having that warm background for the dress area. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is clean my palette and then mix up some paint for the face. Well, having used cerulean blue for part of the background, in the mix there, I thought I'd refresh my palette with my tinting white cerulean blue. In recent portraits I've used ultramarine, but I thought I'd go with the cerulean, the usual alizarin and cadmium yellow light. So what I need to do now is mix up a tone and a colour which is appropriate for kind of a middle tone for the skin. So let's grab some of the tinting white. Same brush as I used for the background, the 1 inch wide synthetic flat. So we've got plenty of tinting white there, and then I'm going to grab a little bit of the yellow and mix that in fairly thoroughly. A little bit more, get that thoroughly mixed in, and then just the slightest little corner of the alizarin, because that's quite a powerful colour, so you don't need very much of it, and that's probably a good place to start, I hope. We'll see how that goes on. Obviously I've got this warm background, so that's going to affect things. Just going to spray the paint in the palette with a little bit of water just to keep things fairly fluid, and then I'm going to start here just above the eye on our right. Let's just reduce the amount of paint I've got on the brush there, and that's not too bad a starting place. So I took a little bit of care with my sketch, so I want to preserve that as best I can. And the sitter today has, really quite smooth skin, so I want to capture something of that, but at the same time I don't want to completely ignore the kind of power or the qualities that having some expressive brush marks can give to your painting. So I'm going to keep things reasonably smooth as I apply the paint, but I'm still being mindful of the direction in which I put the brush stroke down. And although I'm trusting my sketch a reasonable amount, I am checking repeatedly as I apply this first layer that I've got my drawing reasonably correct. Now the forehead and the lighting in my reference is, it's pretty pale across its entirety. There are some areas of mild shadow and mild highlight, but for now I'm content to leave that as a single region of tone. However, when I move to areas like the cheek and around the eye, the shadows are a little bit deeper in places, so where that's the case, I'm going to leave that underlayer exposed, because I'll come back in a moment with a darker tone to help model that area and make things look more three-dimensional. Now, using the tinting white means that some of the underlying drawing, both the orange watercolour marker and the blue watercolour marker, is showing through, and in addition some of the warm undercoat of acrylic is showing through as well, and that's fine from my point of view. Very happy for part of the kind of early stages of the painting to be seen in the finished image. Okay, so what I can do now is take this colour I still have on the palette, still got plenty left. I'm going to add a little bit more of the alizarin, but mix that in again fairly thoroughly. I'm going to spray the surface of the painting with some water, and because these are the interactive acrylics, that's going to keep that surface nice and active for me, meaning that I can blend one colour into another fairly readily. And I don't know how well it's showing up on camera, but what I'm doing now is that's allowing me to just very gently darken certain areas where I've put down just the single light colour. So it's, you know, it's not much of a change in terms of tone just yet. I can probably continue this sort of second level of tone just down onto the shoulders and top of the chest that's showing here. We'll put a little bit here under the chin too. Okay, so I've still got a reasonable amount of that first colour on the palette, and obviously I've darkened that slightly with the alizarin. I'm now going to add a little bit more, and you can see just the slightest touch of that colour really does make quite a difference to the overall shade, so you need to use it fairly sparingly in this application. So once again, just going to gently mist the painting with some water. And now we can go just a touch darker. So for example, the left hand side of the forehead. Is a bit darker than the right hand side. And the far right side is a little bit darker than the centre. Then you've got a little area of subtle shadow here at the top of the nose. There's some shadow on the left of the nose here. And to the left above the eye. And there's even a little bit under the eye as well. And then underneath the cheek on the left. Under this eye as well. A little bit above the left hand side of the eye to our right. Under this cheek as well. This left hand side of the bottom of the nose is relatively darker than the other, but there is a bit of shadow under the right hand edge. This side of the upper lip is a little darker. There's a bit of shadow there. The chin has a little bit of shadow on it, and just underneath the bottom lip as well. It gets a little bit darker there too. And then under here. And then things are darker than I've got them so far. Down here as well. let's put in just the smallest indication of an ear, the bottom of an earlobe there on the right, and we'll do the same here on the left as well. Okay, so we're starting to get a little bit of modelling in, but we need some slightly stronger shadows, and we need to go just a little bit more purpley blue as well. All right, so to do that, still going with this original patch of paint. I mean, obviously I've been topping it up in some senses with, you know, the colours I've added, but nevertheless it's still the same area of the palette. Let's add a little of the cerulean blue, perhaps a little bit more. And a bit more there as well. Let's make sure that's fairly thoroughly mixed. And I think that's going to be hopefully a good starting point. So once again, just keep the surface of the painting from drying out. And then again, we're going to look and see where the subtle shadows are. So there's a touch up here under the hairline. Nothing very much, but it's definitely there. This left side as well. And then the shadow here on the left side of the nose is bluer than I have it. So this tone I have at the moment is, you know, going to help push things in the right direction. And working, you know, in wet like this, obviously I'm getting a lot of soft edges, and at this stage of the painting, you know, that's good. In essence, you know, you're not only getting some nice blending going on, but you're not sort of committing yourself too irreversibly either to any kind of decisions you make in terms of tone or shape and so forth. So as before, just moving around the entire face, picking out those areas where things are darker than I currently have them. Not being overly concerned about getting the colour exactly right. Tone is, in my opinion, you know, more important to establish that and get that reasonably correct. And then you can always adjust the colour a little bit if you need to. Okay, let's go just a little bit darker again. So let's grab some of the cerulean blue. Some of the alizarin, and mix that fairly thoroughly into that patch of colour that I have already. Now that's considerably darker than anything I've put onto the painting so far, so we may end up having to add a little bit of the white to that, but we'll see how it goes. Again, just a mist, still keeping the edges soft for the moment. And then what I'm doing is I'm really squinting at my reference, and I want to pick out the darkest shadows, and so probably going a little bit too dark, but nevertheless I've got to establish a sense of 3 dimensions. So I've got some shadow there on the left of the nose. Some there above the eye. The left side of the cheek there, it's perhaps gone on a little bit heavy, but we'll live with it for the moment. Just a touch there on the left side of the forehead. Certainly darker under the chin here compared to what I currently have. And darker there on the shoulders as well. Now things are looking, you know, rather on the purple side at the moment, but What I'm going to do is, I think that's probably enough for the moment in terms of the face. I'm now going to tackle the hair and just block that in. So to begin doing that, I've simply dragged my brush through a dry paper towel, and I'm picking up some of the cadmium yellow. We'll grab some of the tinting white as well. And let's look at the hair. So the hair is really quite pale on the right hand side of the head here. So it needs to be lighter than the colour I'm putting down, but we just want to get in the right ballpark to begin with. There's also some pale and bright colour here on the right. Over here on the left as well, down to the side of the cheeks. We can continue with this base layer of yellow as I go up, to the left of the forehead. And then the hair gets really, much darker up here, so I can kind of just stop applying the yellow for the moment. Now, having done that, let's grab some more of the tinting white and mix that thoroughly with the bit of colour I've still got left on my brush. And then once again, ensuring that that layer of yellow doesn't dry out. Let's look at the reference again and work our way round, adding some of this lighter colour in. Now, rather than be tempted to draw individual hairs or locks of hair, what I'm doing is just looking at the general texture of the hair and the general direction that it's falling in, and trying to pick out the big shapes and capture just the general sort of sense of movement and the way the hair falls, kind of settles on the head. So we're not, being lured into the trap of doing too much detail at this relatively early stage. So once again, I simply dragged my brush through a dry paper towel. I haven't used any water to clean the brush. And I'm just picking up some more of the tinting white. And if a little bit of the yellow on the brush kind of comes through, I don't actually mind too much. But what I'm going to do at this stage is just look at the dress and just gently drag some of this tinting white fairly lightly across the surface of the dry underlayer that I've got there. And in doing that, what I hope to do is begin to suggest the texture and all the different folds that are in the fabric of the dress. Again, without going into a huge amount of laborious detail. And if so, at the moment, none of the yellow is showing through, to be honest with you, but if it had, I wouldn't have minded, because it's going to kind of echo the yellow that I've put into the hair. So, yeah, but this sort of combo of colours, that's working reasonably okay, I think, to begin to suggest the shoulders of the dress. Now, while I'm here with this same colour on my brush, I can just use some of that to just tap in a little bit of light tone where we've got these earrings. Obviously hanging on the ears, as you would expect. And now, having done that, I'm going to come in and work on the eyes and the mouth. So I've switched to a small filbert now, and I'm just taking some of the pure tinting white, and I'm going to apply that to the whites of the eyes. Now, If you've seen any of my previous portrait videos, you'll know that I typically use a little bit of blue in the mix because the whites of the eyes are seldom pure white. And that's definitely the case here in my reference, but because this tinting white is, as I've mentioned a couple of times now, it's a little bit transparent. So some of this underlying orange is going to show through, and it's not going to be a pure white which ends up on the painting, even though that's all that's on my brush. So I just wanted to see the kind of effect that I get by doing that. And also, because I've gone over the blue watercolor marker, some of that pale blue is kind of just being dragged into the brush stroke as well. So for now, that's okay. So let's go back to the palette, a little bit of the tinting white again, but now I want some of the cerulean blue. And we'll mix that in to give us a fairly pale blue. And I'll use that to just block in as a solid area of colour the iris on the right hand side here. And we'll do the same for the other eye. And then within that light blue, there are darker areas of blue, so I can pick up some more of the cerulean blue and mix that into what I had already. And again, we don't need to go into a huge amount of detail at this stage, but there's a darker area of blue there, a darker area there. So that's begun to suggest the eyes with a little bit of light falling on them. And while we're up in this area of the face, I may as well do a little bit of work on the eyelids and the eyebrows as well. So I'm going to go back into this kind of purple colour I had and add just a little bit more of the alizarin. And let's put that in for the colour for the upper lid. Now there's a little bit of highlight on the upper lid there, but I'll come back and do that at a later stage. But in doing that, that's just helping me to kind of begin to define the eyes a little bit more clearly. And that colour will be an imperfect but reasonable first step to the base layer for the eyebrows. Now we can add a little bit more blue, a little bit more alizarin. I've just added probably too much there. Let's grab a touch of that yellow, and then let's put that in to darken. Parts of the brows. Now while that's on my brush, let me just zoom out on my reference a little bit. What I can do is use that same colour. This wasn't what I was intending to do. I will come to the mouth in a moment, but what I can do is use some of that to begin to put in some of the shadow areas within the hair. So again, these colours, they aren't right in terms of a hyper-realistic representation, but in terms of a tonal approximation, they're not too far out, and that's all I need for the moment. Okay, so that same colour I can use to just pull out the line of the necklace a little bit there as well. And then, having done that, may as well use the same colour to just put in the line where the upper lip meets the lower. And again, I can refine that, you know, further later on, but let me just add a little more alizarin to that mixture with a little bit of the cerulean blue again. And we'll use that colour, let's get a bit more blue in there. We'll use that colour to begin to darken the nostrils. And then I'm just going to drag most of that off of the brush. Let's grab some alizarin and put that into that pale purple I had. Grab some of the nearby white from earlier. And that's a reasonable starting point now for the lips. So we can whoops, went a little bit wayward there, but we can now paint the lips in, just blocking with colour, keeping in mind the outline. And then let's add a little bit more white to that same colour. And we'll begin to just put in a few little highlights, fairly subtle at this stage. Now the darker version of the colour I used on the lips, that's actually going to work reasonably well for the eyelids as well. I don't know whether there's eyeshadow or whether it just looks that way in my reference, but there are areas around the eye which are almost, you know, purple or red in colour, deep red. And having added those little patches of colour in, let's take a closer look at the nose now. So I'm going to go back to that kind of mid-purple I had and see how well that works. Applying that to kind of the area around the nostrils here. I'll use a little bit of that same colour up around the eyes as well. And then I'm going to add some white to that colour. Just add, you know, oh, that's way too dark. Let's see if we can get a bit more white. Try and lift off some of that. There we go. So I'll need to fix that properly in a bit, but for now, let's go back to the lighter version that I've now got on my brush. And then see if we can use this sort of gentle purple colour elsewhere around the mouth to begin to, bring out the expression. Now, having cleaned this little filbert, let's grab some of the cerulean blue and the alizarin crimson. A bit more blue there. And so I've got a reasonably strong purple now. And I'm going to use that to begin to suggest the eyelashes. And I quite like that colour, so I'm going to pop a bit of that on this right nostril and a bit on the left as well. And then I think I'm going to be able to use a touch of that in this corner of the mouth. Little touch just left of centre, and a flick to the other side of the mouth as well. And I think maybe even for the pupils. I don't think I've ever used this colour for, well, probably not very much at all, exactly this colour, but for the pupils in the eyes, I don't think I ever have. And I think that's going to work reasonably well. Oops, if I can hold my hand steady. It's not too bad, I don't think. All right, well, I cleaned my brush reasonably thoroughly, and I've just picked up some of the tinting white. So again, a little technique I haven't really tried before, but I'm going to give it a go now. Is because the tinting white is, as I've mentioned, a little bit translucent, I'm hoping that if I lightly drag a line of this white from the left of the pupil across the iris into the white of the eye, I'm hoping that translucency will give me a little bit of complexity within the highlight in a fairly efficient way. So let's see if it works. And it does work reasonably well. I mean, it's a very subtle effect. But that's kind of the point. And I'm going to come back in a bit, with some titanium white to really make just the brightest bit of the highlight in the eye pop. I'm just going to add a little bit more of this tinting white to the right hand side of this eye. And then this side doesn't need anything. If anything, that side needs to be in a little bit of deeper shadow than I've got it. I'm going to do the same on the lips actually while I'm here with the white. That's perhaps a little bit bright, but it's okay, I think. All right, so I want to go back to the hair now. So I've switched to a 1/2 inch wide, reasonably frayed, flat synthetic brush, and I've just got a fresh batch of the tinting white on that brush. And what I'm going to do is just drag that through parts of the hair to just lighten it here and there. And then, while I've got that on the brush, let's just look at the dress again. I can perhaps just increase the highlights in just a couple of key areas by putting on this additional layer of white. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave that to dry now, and then we'll come back and have a look and see what needs doing to it. Well, looking at the painting, I haven't been patient enough to let it fully dry, and I'm thinking I'm not sure I want to do too much more to it. I definitely need to do some more, but there's a certain freshness to the way it's painted at the moment, and although it's not sort of fully finished, if you like, in certain areas, I don't want to risk losing that freshness. So what I'm thinking of doing, my first step, is I'm going to take some more of the cerulean blue and some more of the alizarin and mix those two together to get a deep purple. But I want to go a little more towards the blue than I did for the dark purple I used earlier. Let's see if we can just get a little more blue in there. I'm not too fussed, but I just want to use that dark colour to add some of the darker shadows up here in the hair. And again, this isn't going to be correct in terms of the reference, but I think, or my hope is, it's going to work reasonably well in terms of the painting. So, I haven't diluted the paint at all here, so I'm kind of just doing a little bit of dry brush over what I've done already in places. And then, if I want to get a more solid region of shadow, I can obviously push harder with the brush. A little bit of dry brush there in between the two regions of fairly solid shadow. And then I want to continue that along down there. And over on the right here, put a little bit more shadow there. A couple of licks there. A couple of touches there as well on the right hand side of the face. And then let me just adjust my reference a little bit here. I just want to zoom in a touch. So then here as well, just darken, not the whole area, but key parts of it. And then let's see where we are. So let's get a little bit of mix that in with the tinting white a bit. A little bit more of the alizarin. Touch of the yellow. Just darken some little bits of the brows here and there. Having done that, I've just mixed that colour I had into the purple that I was using a moment ago, and I just want to bring a little bit of this darkness, just a touch down here. Just little bits dry brushed on to hint at the texture of the hair. And then clean my brush again, grab some more of the tinting white mixed in with the yellow. Get a bit more yellow on the brush. just want to soften the edges of some of those dark areas that I've put in. And then I need to deal with these earrings in a bit more detail. And to do that, now obviously I don't want to go into a huge depiction of the earrings, but I just need to make them stand out a little bit more than they are. Now the base colour that I already have for the earrings actually isn't too far off, so I've just grabbed some of the tinting white and I'm going to put that down fairly impasto style, so a very thick layer of paint to increase the opacity of the white I'm putting down, so that they're sort of hinting at some sparkly highlights on the earrings. And then my plan was to use titanium white for the final highlights in the eyes, but I'm actually thinking I'm going to try the same trick with the tinting white now that I've seen that I can do that. So let's see if I can get this to work. So I need to put a highlight here. That's perhaps a little small. That's better. And then one in a similar spot on this eye. And then I'm just going to pick up the merest touch of blue. Oh, I've got yellow on my brush. Just give me a second. So I've put just the slightest touch of blue in with the tinting white. I'm going to use that just to put a couple of hopefully fairly subtle highlights on the nose there, on the cheek, and just look at all over the face really, and just see where these are occurring. Without going too, certainly don't want to overdo it. But it's just hopefully just enough to lift the lighting a little bit, so that you really feel that light is playing across the surface. And then I just need to do a touch for the necklace. So I've just loaded my brush with the tinting white, and I think, well, we'll see how well this works. Put a line across there, perhaps a little highlight there. And just want to tweak that part of the hair, I think. So let's go back in with the pale yellow, just taking the same white I had on the brush and mixing it in with the yellow. Just kind of soften some of this area a little bit. So here's a look at the finished painting, and overall I like the effect that switching from ultramarine blue to the cerulean blue has had. It was really quite a new experience for me to mix up my colours from that new set of primaries. The main challenge I had was going dark enough, so when I would mix up a really dark colour in the past, I would usually base that on ultramarine blue and the alizarin crimson. But what I'm thinking now going forward is I like this combination of colours, and if I was going to really lock in the likeness of this portrait, I would need to do some more work on the eyes and the mouth in particular. But I like the freshness of the feeling of this painting, the way the paint's gone down, and the style of the brushwork. So my thinking now is I'm going to continue with the tinting white next week, but I'm going to change one of the colours again. I'll stick with the cerulean blue, but I'll change one of the other colours on my palette to give me a new colour mixing experience, and then we'll see how that goes. Either way, hope you enjoyed this demo. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I hope to see you next Sunday for the next episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.